Hello everyone, Nick the DM here with more of that Dungeons & Dragons lore that we all crave. In this video, we are switching focus from my recent coverage of the fiends of the lower planes to take a look at the embodiments of good in the multiverse. That's right, I'm talking about Celestials. So, let's get into it. Celestial is a collective term for certain natives from the 7 upper planes of the Great Wheel cosmology or the celestial planes of the World Tree cosmology. 4th edition's World Axis cosmology erased Celestials and replaced them with its own system of angels, but that's for a different video. The outer planes that Celestials call home foster an astounding variety of good creatures. However, not every resident of the planes of good is a Celestial. Like the fiends, Celestials can be categorized into a few main groups. The Asimon, the Archons, Celestial Archons specifically, not the elementals of the same name, the Asuras, the Eladrins, Celestial Eladrins, not to be confused with the Fey, Noble, or Common Eladrin, which will have their own videos, and the Cardinals are often considered the only true celestial races. Warriors of Heaven from Advanced D&D 2nd Edition mention that, while they aren't as pure-blooded as their relatives, many sages included the Aasimar in the celestial roster, similar to how, at the time, many considered tieflings a fiend. Apart from these major groupings, there are other individual celestial types that aren't included in the aforementioned groups, but are still celestials, like the Barriors, Coatls, Holophants, and Pegasi, to name a few. The appearances of the celestials vary widely, but they are always good-looking and pleasant to behold. One example, according to the Player's Guide to Faerun from 3rd edition, is that angels, Asimon, in Dwarf Home are often short and more stout, resembling dwarves more than humans. Perhaps this was out of respect for the powers of that realm. The goodness of Celestials is of a quality and intensity that makes many paladins feel diminished and inadequate by comparison. Many Celestials are the servants of deities, employed as messengers or agents in the mortal realm and throughout the planes. Despite their great diversity, all Celestials unite to battle fiends from the infernal realms or to assist lost travelers. Creatures on the material plane that Celestials have helped or interacted with sometimes refer to them as simply angels, being unaware of the varieties of the good-aligned planar creatures. Evil creatures in general, and fiends in particular, are anathema to Celestials. They may not spend all their waking hours rooting out Tanari and Beatezu from every corner of the multiverse, but when confronted by fiends of any sort, they seldom back down. Celestials are often involved in prolonged wars against fiends of various types, and armies of Celestials occasionally take the battle to their enemies. Though Celestials are generally peace-loving creatures, they are also terrible foes. One reason for the incredible abilities of the Celestials is the type of threats they face. Fiends and other horrible monsters that prowl the outer planes present difficult challenges to even the most magically proficient celestial beings. Celestials are the antithesis of the fiends that inhabit the lower planes. Where the Beatezu, Tanari, Yugoloths, and other fiends are extremely grim reflections and horrible personifications of all that is evil and corrupt, the Celestials are embodiments of all that is good and pure in the multiverse. They epitomize valor and benevolence, using their tremendous powers to inspire others towards acts of charity, mercy, and helpfulness. The members of the celestial races are magnificent Empyreal beings. They claim the vast expanse of the multiverse known, or once known, as the upper planes, as their home. The summits of Mount Celestia, the glades of Arborea, the fertile hills of Elysium, the twin paradises of Bytopia, the resident harmony of Arcadia, the wild beastlands, and Isgard. These are the realms of the Celestials. With unwavering determination, these beings maintain the sanctity of their lands and further the cause of good by opposing fiends and other kinds of evil. Celestials are paradoxical beings, majestic in power, yet gentle in nature, merciful to the repentant and ruthless towards the unredeemable. They are divine heralds, carrying the messages of the gods of the upper planes to those who need to hear them. Celestials are seekers, wandering the planes to find the good in all things. They are also missionaries, ministering those in need throughout the multiverse. In addition to that, they are guides, leading champions on quests against the forces of darkness. And what's more, they are punishers of evildoers, liberators of the enslaved, and protectors of the innocent and enfeebled. Celestials look upon evil as a plague they must crush, or at least hold at bay, and they always use their powers for the utmost benefit of others. Were it not for the efforts of these holy beings to spread peace and harmony throughout the multiverse, the fiends would have taken the blood war to every corner of existence and cast the cosmos into ruin ages ago. Despite the fact that the fiends vastly outnumber their upper planar counterparts, the Celestials possess amazing powers, and their purity and unfailing virtue serve as great assets against their foes. Few fiends have the conviction to look a Celestial in the eyes without exhibiting some sign of fear. Even a dark creature as mighty as a pit fiend cannot fully suppress a sense of trepidation and unease when facing a lesser Celestial, even if the fiend knows it's more powerful than its goodly foe. Celestials are not perfect beings, although they strive to be so. They hold in their hearts a firm dedication to furthering the cause of good, viewing themselves as vessels through which good, as a force, does its work. Celestials exist to uphold the tenets of their alignments and defeat evil wherever they find it. Even the most chaotic Celestials are truthful to themselves, if not always to others. A little white lie probably wouldn't get an upper planar being into serious trouble, nor would a fanciful tale that listeners should understand to be fictional. Occasionally, however, a Celestial sacrifices too much or makes the wrong choice. This can result in repercussions ranging from demotion to confinement to the upper planes until the offender successfully makes amends. Rarely, a Celestial makes a terrible mistake or commits an egregious offense in the name of good and seeks neither repentance nor salvation from it. Celestials are good by nature, so the exceptional Celestial who strays from a good alignment is a horrifying rarity. Such a fallen Celestial faces the worst punishment imaginable: dismissal from their race's hierarchy and expulsion from the upper planes. Some such beings have continued to act in the name of good as rogues, but others, no longer able to rely on the support and company of their noble comrades, have fallen further still. At one time it was whispered that a few had even become fiends. While this may have been only whispered about at one point, now it's an undeniable truth, with beings such as Adimarchus, Malkazid, and Zariel being some of the strongest fiends as well as fallen Celestials. Regardless of how they serve the greater power of good, Celestials enjoy what many lower-ranking fiends can never hope to know: free will. Although some of the Celestial races enforce strict social hierarchies, all Celestials are free-thinking beings permitted to make choices in their everyday, sometimes immortal, lives. They must, of course, act in accordance with their alignments, but within those boundaries they can choose their own destinies, their own fates. One trait that all Celestials share, regardless of race, station, or individual viewpoint, is their general good nature. Malice and hatred are as alien to Celestials as genuine love and caring are to the fiendish beings of the lower planes. Residents of other planes tend to perceive Celestials as the embodiment of all that is good. More accurately, they are beings of tremendous conviction who use their power and influence to aid the cause of good and thwart the machinations of evil. All Celestials share this characteristic regardless of their specific alignments. Though all true Celestials must be good aligned, individuals may be lawful good, neutral good, or chaotic good, depending on their home plane, race, and individual disposition. Typically it goes, Aasimon can be any good alignment, Archons are lawful good, Asuras and Celestial Eladrin are chaotic good, and Cardinals are neutral good. Asuras are believed to be natives of Isgard, but they roam throughout the upper planes. While most are chaotic good, there are some neutral good Asuras. This is, possibly, one of the things that causes the divide between scholars on whether Aasimar can be considered true Celestials. Because while other Celestials are inclined towards good alignments, Aasimar hold a disposition towards being any non-evil alignment. An Aasimar has greater freedom in alignment and location than a true Celestial does because of the mortal parent's influence. How Celestials define, understand, and embody the concept of good varies from one to the next. While an Archon's understanding is shaped by their adherence to the principles of law, an Eladrin's is equally shaped by their chaotic viewpoint. The Cardinals may claim to represent pure good, untainted by concerns of law and chaos, but many would argue that their very commitment to neutrality undermines their goodness. The predominant alignment of a celestial race determines the structure of its society, but not necessarily the disposition of each individual. The lawful good Archons, for example, have an orderly social structure with a strict hierarchy and rigid moral code. Each member must follow a defined path of righteousness. By comparison, the neutral good Cardinals place no innate value on social organization, creating and dissolving social orders as needs arise. Though the chaotic good Eladrins and Asuras have well-defined societies, they do not impose strict moral guidelines on individuals. Another thing to keep in mind, although most Archons are lawful good, they do not all follow the same set of strictures, nor do they necessarily share a common disposition. Likewise, one shouldn't expect all Eladrins to be chaotic or all Cardinals to be neutral. Racial alignment serves as a general guide, but Celestials are as diverse as any other advanced beings. Each exhibits a distinct personality, unique behavior, and personal ideology. Politics on the upper planes. Many Celestials are fond of debating these issues with each other, sometimes with anyone who will argue with them. Unlike the destructive scheming and malevolent conspiracies of the lower planes, the politics of the upper planes serves to reinforce goodness and preserve purity. The celestial races are more likely to have disputes than conflicts, which means they tend to resolve their differences through moderated debates and even-tempered arguments. Warriors of Heaven from Advanced D&D 2nd Edition says that only rarely do Celestials resort to physical altercations to make their point, though this does happen. Though that same source later contradicts itself by claiming the Celestials never allow their arguments to degrade into violence. The Book of Exalted Deeds from 3rd edition states that, in stark contrast to the fiends of the lower planes, these philosophical differences among the Celestials never erupt into bloodshed. Corrupt hierarchs in good-aligned churches on the material plane have been known to paint vivid portraits of a war in the heavens between the forces of law and chaos, primarily as a means to justify their own holy warfare against other good faiths. The Celestials, along with the deities of good, recognize these inventions as manifestations of the taint of evil among their followers. Slaughtering good creatures, even under the guise of a just war, is never a good act, and it is unthinkable to Celestials who remain untainted by the lure of evil. The most persistent dispute among Celestials is how to deal with the spread of evil. Sometimes a Celestial may question what is important. To serve a greater good, such a being might have to compromise or make sacrifices. This fact has created many schisms within the upper planes, as Celestials argue and debate about which is right and which sacrifices are too great. Some believe it is enough to push evil back into the lower planes and contain it, while others want to destroy it utterly, effectively cleansing the multiverse of its stink. Certain groups argue that evil beings should have a chance to redeem themselves. Regardless of which viewpoint is in favor with a particular race, it seems that every Celestial on the upper planes has a personal opinion on this issue. To say that Archons favor evil's redemption over its annihilation, or that all Guardianals enjoy hunting fiends across the outer planes, is to make a sweeping generalization. Such statements seldom encapsulate the viewpoint of any one individual. Still, it is possible to draw broad distinctions among the celestial races. In the end, the different celestial races are careful to maintain a strong, united front against the ever-present threat of the Blood War. Which brings us to our next topic, the Blood War. Although it's impossible to count the number of Celestials living on the upper planes or the number of fiends dwelling in the bottomless reaches of the lower planes, most scholars acknowledge that the latter are considerably more numerous. However, the fiends' ever-changing and treacherous natures keeps them at each other's proverbial throats. This is of great use to the Celestials, and to some, this seems much too convenient. Yes, some people believe that the Celestials are the secret masters of the Blood War, subtly turning the Beatezu, devils, and Tanari, demons, against one another to divert their attention from the upper planes and the rest of the multiverse. Archons, Asuras, Asimon, upper-planar Celestials of all sorts see the hazards inherent in the Blood War and the danger should the fighting end prematurely. It's odd, but the Celestials have the most vested interest in making sure the battles rage. Without the war to keep the fiends occupied, they'll surely turn their attention to other lands. Perhaps even team up to attack the upper planes. But the truth is that the Celestials have little involvement in the war, and they certainly didn't start it. The infernal conflict is the fiends' own doing, proof that evil destroys itself. Most Celestials strive only to keep the Blood War from spilling over into the uncorrupted realms of the multiverse. If the Celestials truly were pulling the strings of the warring factions to keep the rest of the cosmos safe, they'd be considered failures. The fiends still ravage the outer planes and the prime material more often than anyone would like, and sometimes they take the Blood War to other lands, claiming many innocent lives in the process. On the other hand, some Celestials fear that if the fiendish fighting were to end, the Beatezu and the Tanari might unite in a terrible alliance and try to raise the upper planes. This possibility has led a few of the more independent Celestials to encourage or prolong the war, having convinced themselves that their dubious actions can bring the most good to the most people. Most Celestials, however, believe that the Blood War will never end, not as long as one Beatezu is left to oppose one Tanari. Yes, it's a pity that innocents are caught in the destruction of the war, but their sacrifices serve a greater purpose. Even the chaotic Celestials can see that, though they have a hard time accepting the inevitability of the death of innocents. Many chaotic Asimon work to save any poor souls caught in the path of the fiends. The lawful Archons undertake rescue missions as well, but with less diligence. They believe it's impossible to save everyone, so they focus on containing the war's spread. Armies of Celestials patrol the borders of their planes, watching vigilantly to ensure that no fiendish conspirators slip past to harass the petitioners of light. Now and then, squadrons of Celestials invade the lower planes to turn the tables. Those who volunteer for such missions are lauded for their sacrifice, for few survive. However, the strikes remind the fiends to stick to their own ground, and underscore that inflicting harm on the innocent does not always come without a price. Occasionally, squabbling breaks out between the lawful and chaotic Celestials, usually when it looks like the fiends are weak and especially vulnerable to attack. That's when the infighting erupts. Which armies should the Celestials hammer? The orderly Archons call for the total eradication of the Tanar'ri, for the Beatezu are a foe they can understand and maneuver against. The Asuras and the chaotic Asimon, on the other hand, can't imagine the triumph of law, which is what the victory of the Beatezu would entail. They prefer the random actions of the Tanar'ri, believing that chance should determine the fate of the multiverse. Thus, the forces of good hamstring themselves just when they could make a decisive blow against their immortal enemies. In time, they may realize that the longer they wait, the less likely it is that the fiends will destroy each other. But until that day, the dogmas of law and chaos will split the upper planes as well as the lower. Though, in the end, as devoted as they are to law, the Archons of Celestia are far better able to tolerate the chaos of the Celestial Eladrins than they are able to stomach the evil of Beator's devils. When there has been real war in the heavens, and it has happened, it has been because of fallen Celestials who eventually leave the upper planes entirely to find new homes on the planes of evil. The Concordance and the Parliament. As a group, Celestials champion the betterment of the multiverse and encourage the spread of harmony and freedom, both for individuals and for societies. How best to achieve these goals is a matter of debate, and has created some ideological rifts among the various celestial races, as I mentioned earlier. But unlike fiends who use malice and hatred to incite wars among their own kind, Celestials do not turn on each other. To take up arms and strike down another good being is simply unheard of. So, while their disputes are nothing even close to the eternal fiendish battle, the occasional rumors of holy wars on the upper planes that I mentioned earlier should rightfully give anyone pause. But where the fiends have their blood war, their good-aligned outer planar counterparts have the Celestial Concordance, a pact between the races to aid one another should any external force seriously threaten the upper planes. The Concordance allows the Celestials to present a single harmonious front against all evil in the multiverse. Periodically, representatives of the various celestial races gather to plan a defense against a threatened invasion, or merely to discuss the status of their planes. This assemblage is called the Parliament of the Concordance, or simply the Parliament. When it convenes, representatives of the Asimon, Archons, Asuras, Celestial Eladrins, and Cardinals debate the best way to implement the Concordance and which role each race should play. These meetings, which are never recorded in any written form, are more monumental and awe-inspiring than any prime material mortal can imagine. Chairing each gathering and coordinating the defense of the upper planes is a figure known as the Archpenitar. Zora Seberati, a solar Asimon in the service of the Egyptian god Ra, known as Re or Re-Herakti in the world of Faerun, currently holds this office, although the representatives elect a new Archpenitar every 3 centuries or so. Fun fact, Zora is a general noble title in the region of Mulmaster. Zora was the feminine version while Zor was the masculine. The actual ranking of this title was unknown, but should the head of a Mulmaster family, given the title of Lord regardless of gender, ever fall, the Zors and Zoras of the family would fall to the rank of commoners. Whether or not this has any relation to Zora Seberati is unclear. I just thought it was a neat fact that I thought I would include. Some Celestials believe that the Concordance is the only hope of destroying evil in the multiverse, but there are others who believe that the sheer magnitude of such a conflict would tear apart the very fabric of the planes. This debate often rages during meetings of the Parliament, and the most fervent Celestials encourage their peers to strike deep into the lower planes, where evil breeds like a plague. Their detractors counter that any such invasion could force an alliance, perhaps temporary, perhaps not, between the warring Beatezu and Tanari, giving rise to an unstoppable force of evil. Other Celestials find the very idea of destroying anything, even a fiend, less than palatable. Perhaps the most heated debate among the Celestials involves the so-called ethical paradox, the belief that good cannot exist without evil, and that to destroy evil utterly would doom the whole multiverse. Thus, the Concordance remains a powerful force in defense of the upper planes, and not an excuse to launch attacks or eradicate the fiends. Meanwhile, the celestial races struggle to keep the blood war confined to the lower planes, where the Tanari, the Beatezu, and their kin can fight without compromising the rest of the multiverse. Daily life on the upper planes. Celestials don't spend every moment performing good deeds and looking for evil to banish. They don't rise each morning and make lists of noble actions to perform that day. They do accomplish much good, but they're just naturally predisposed towards benevolence. It's not something they must plan for or think about. So, when they are not locked in debate over the latest events of the Blood War or quelling a threat to the upper planes, Celestials find plenty of distractions to occupy their time. The truth is that most Celestials take special delight in simple things. For example, Tambril, a Deva who serves as a military adjutant to the Norse god Frey on Isgard, makes horseshoes for Equars whenever he's not engaged in affairs that concern the Norse pantheon. Zagzagal, the Warden Archon who guards the gates to the realm of Arakanor on Mount Celestia, is renowned for a charming ale he brews and offers to thirsty passerbys, many of whom are dwarves with a taste for the good stuff. Visitors to the upper planes are often taken aback by the remarkable dichotomy of the celestial lifestyle, which can seem rustic one moment and truly majestic the next. Most Celestials can harness incredible might and magic, so it stands to reason that sheer power isn't the measure of their worth to one another or to themselves. Instead, they get tremendous personal satisfaction from farming, training animals, telling stories, playing musical instruments, carving stone and wood, and making exquisitely detailed maps, among many other activities. Crafting items with their own hands gives Celestials peace of mind, as well as the satisfaction of doing something constructive. And since they rarely feel a need to profit from their endeavors, the satisfaction of a task well done is its own reward. Some Celestials also enjoy pursuing hobbies and interests they acquire during time spent in the company of mortals. For example, when not attending the earth goddess Shantea on his home plane of Elysium, Lawns, the Servidal, spends most of his days fishing by a brook that flows into the river Oceanus. Lawns favors gem-studded lures, and he obtains most of his precious stones from an Asurus gem cutter who lives in the city of the star in Amoria, the first layer of Elysium. Although both deeds and diversions are important in their daily lives, Celestials gain their strength through devotion to the gods. All Celestials are grounded by their faith in one or more resident deities of the upper planes. The Celestials are the gods' servants, living extensions of divine influence. They honor their gods by performing duties faithfully and completing special quests to the best of their abilities. These devout stewards never question the will of the powers they serve, apart from the most extreme cases of fallen Celestials. The gods only peripherally monitor the activities of their mortal worshippers on the prime material plane, but they watch the Celestials closely. In fact, it's quite common for deities to intervene in the affairs of their servants, rewarding those who are valorous and obedient, and punishing those who are defiant or less competent. Celestial Oaths. Celestials, regardless of their alignment, are bound by any oath they take. An oath is greater in scope and far more binding than a general promise. It is a solemn vow that commits the Celestial to a particular deed or course of action. An oath, once spoken, becomes part of the Celestial's being and a source of personal power. Any Celestial who takes an oath must fulfill it, even if doing so requires great sacrifice. A Celestial might swear an oath for any of several reasons. A deity could require an oath of completion when assigning a Celestial an important task. A fiend negotiating for the release of prisoners could make its adversary swear to do it no harm after the release of the captives. A Celestial might voluntarily swear an oath to protect a comrade, guard a holy relic for a certain period of time, or slay a monster responsible for a heinous atrocity. Ultimately, it is the Celestial's choice whether to take an oath, but once made, it is binding. So Celestials don't swear oaths without much consideration, though they sometimes find themselves in situations where refusing to take one could spell disaster for them or their comrades. A Celestial who breaks an oath for any reason loses all innate abilities, magic resistance, and special immunities. Furthermore, the Oathbreaker loses 1 point of Charisma, a loss that only a god can restore, and then only after a long period of atonement. On the other hand, a Celestial who fulfills or adheres to a difficult oath should gain a substantial reward in terms of either experience points for certain Celestials in older editions, or an increase in station. An appropriate reward is determined based on the difficulty involved in taking and fulfilling the oath. The creation of Celestials. Some of the Celestial races, specifically the Aasimon, Archons, and Asuras, are actually the transformed spirits of petitioners, good-aligned mortals who have died and gone to whichever upper plane most closely matches their alignment. Not all petitioners become Celestials, of course. Some are reborn as different planar life forms. Members of the other races, the Celestial Eladrin and the Cardinals, are actually born to parents of their race and raised on the upper planes as native beings. Ascendance and Promotion. A Celestial who completes a special quest or performs some deed that furthers the cause of good can get more than just the reward of doing a good job, though often that is a reward unto itself for most Celestials. As they do so, they receive higher stations and greater influence in their societies. Usually new spell-like abilities, immunities, and the like also accompany these promotions. No training is involved in this process. A Celestial's newfound skills are rewards from the gods that manifest immediately. This increase in stature and power is called Ascendance. For the immortal Celestials, the Aasimon and the Archons, Ascendance holds even greater significance, for it involves physical transformations as well as improved status. Aasimons begin as Agathanon warriors. Their first promotion, earned through successful completion of several special missions, changes them into entirely different creatures called Devas. With subsequent promotions, they can evolve to become planetars or even solars. Archons start out as Lantern Archons, and, through their valorous deeds, gain the experience needed to transform into Hound, Warden, Sword, Trumpet Archons, and even possibly Tome Archons in the rarest of circumstances. Though this specific order was from Warriors of Heaven, and there have been other Archon varieties noted in other editions, I'll cover that more in the Archon video. The mortal Celestials, the Aasimar, Asuras, Eladrins, and Cardinals, do not assume new shapes as they gain experience. Much like other kinds of mortals, they measure ascendance only in terms of the benefits gained through level increases or those of societal station, as mentioned earlier. So no new forms, but they could potentially get levels. Like you could, in earlier editions, have a Cardinal with 2 levels in Fighter, no matter which level of Cardinal it is. Same with Celestial Eladrins, Asuras, and of course the Aasimar, as most are player characters nowadays. Descendants and the Falling. Although beings from other planes perceive Celestials as embodiments of all that is good and righteous, the road to the lower planes is paved with good intentions. Celestials with only the best goals in mind sometimes perform deeds that are morally or ethically questionable. When focused on the greater good, even those of pure conscience might overlook the immediate harm their actions could inflict on others. Such Celestials tread a fine line between righteousness and villainy. Most can step back and see the error of their ways, either by themselves or with the guidance of superiors. A few Celestials, however, have ignored their consciences and lost the true path, coming to regard morally or ethically indefensible situations as excuses to commit ruthless, selfish, or capricious acts. Celestials who neglect their duties, fail to serve as inspiring examples of goodness, or commit egregious acts of evil come to the attention of their superiors and their gods immediately. Unless the actions in question are absolutely deplorable, these greater forces rarely act against the transgressors immediately, hoping that they will realize their errors, repent, and atone on their own. But if the offenders continue down the road to villainy, the gods eventually judge them unworthy of their powers or stations. Such a transgressor is said to have fallen from grace and may suffer a decline in station, a loss of experience points or levels if they have any, a loss of powers, or all of the above at their deity's discretion. Gods may at any time take back the innate powers with which they have gifted their servants if they decide the recipients are no longer deserving, as of 2nd edition lore anyways. Judgment in these situations is swift and often brutal. Instead of ascending through the hierarchy of their races, Celestials who have fallen from grace descend, losing power and influence, and in the case of the Aasimar and Archons, changing forms as well. Their peers neither scorn nor ridicule them, however. As charitable beings, Celestials tend to rally around their fallen fellows and try to help them regain positions of favor. Offenders who spurn this goodwill and continue to act against the will of their deities suffer further punishments, until either they reform or their disobedience warrants expulsion from the upper planes. How far a Celestial falls is a matter left to the gods. The severity of the punishment is based on the nature of the offense and the offender's track record. Loss of experience points or the temporary loss of one or more innate abilities or special privileges is an appropriate penalty for minor sins. More grievous offenses or routine negligence of duty may warrant the loss of one full class level or the loss of all innate magical abilities, pending atonement. Celestials can atone for their transgressions and convince the gods to restore their powers by earning back their lost experience through good deeds and completing one or more special missions. Aasimar are unique among the Celestials in one respect. As of 2nd edition Warriors of Heaven, and referring more specifically to Celestial PCs, that being player characters, since Devas, Planetars, and Solars don't accumulate experience points for their deeds, they tend to suffer even greater punishments for their offenses. Those who fail to serve the cause of good in the manner their superiors expect suffer a loss of status, innate magical abilities, or both. Celestials who continue to fall from grace and decline to mend their ways are no longer contributing to the cause of good. Such transgressors are stripped of their innate abilities and brought before the Celestial Tribunal for judgment. Most offenders have one chance to petition for reinstatement by convincing the tribunal that they are worthy and not beyond redemption. Of course, Celestials who have performed deliberate acts of malevolence have no opportunity to ask for a second chance. Those whom the Tribunal deems unfit are cast out of the upper planes to wander the rest of the multiverse without the powers, immunities, and abilities to which they have grown accustomed. Those few offenders who manage to flee the upper planes and escape judgment and punishment usually end up wandering the multiverse in disgrace. Sometimes their peers hunt them down and ask them to return and face the Tribunal. This decision is purely voluntary. Those who comply place themselves at the mercy of the Celestial Tribunal, and those who refuse must continue to live in exile without their God-granted powers. Speaking of which, the Celestial Tribunal. The Tribunal is an assembly of Celestials charged with determining the fate of a peer whose future as an emissary of good is in grave doubt. Typically, the Tribunal gathers in a sanctified place within the dominion of the transgressor's deity. This is a rare and momentous event, and those charged with passing judgment on another Celestial never take that responsibility lightly. Presiding over the Tribunal is a proxy who speaks the words of the deity and weighs the evidence presented. An advocate, usually a Celestial unacquainted with the accused, details the specific wrongdoings that precipitated this gathering, then tries to convince the offender to repent and petition the Tribunal for a chance at redemption. Celestials who sincerely repent usually receive an opportunity to make amends, since the proxy presiding over a tribunal is invariably merciful. Even so, however, the offender must face punishments in the form of a reduction in power and status. Transformative Celestials return to their base forms, Agathonon for Asimon and Lantern Archons for Archons, and suffer a corresponding loss of abilities. Asuras, Eladrins, and Cardinals lose one level of experience along with all the abilities and advantages tied to it, and are confined to a particular upper plane for a set period of time. Eladrins must remain in Arborea for 1001 years, Cardinals in Elysium for 1 year, and Asuras in a plane of the Tribunal's choice for 100 years. Such descended Celestials, however, may gain back experience through deeds just as they did before, with no penalties to reacquisition. Offenders who show no inclination towards repentance and express no sincere desire to undo their evil ways are forever stripped of their powers and cast into the lower planes. These are the fallen, whose names are spoken nevermore. Left to the mercy of the fiends, they quickly perish, and the lower planar beings twist their spirits into Naparibo for lawful evil, Manes for chaotic evil, or Larva for neutral evil, depending on their moral disposition. Rarely, fallen Celestials survive their new transformation and rise to positions of prominence within the infernal legions of the Beatezu, Tanari, or Yugoloths. More often, though, the fiends sense what the former Celestials once were and devour them utterly. However, there have been some cases of Celestials not going through the process of becoming lesser fiends, and instead just being corrupted by either circumstances or the taint of the planes of evil, and simply transforming into an evil creature of great power right away, such as Zariel and others mentioned earlier, specifically one being Adi Marcus, if you want to check out that video. Because of their partially mortal parentage, Aasimar aren't considered pure Celestials, so they have no right to judgment by a Celestial Tribunal. Aasimar who turned evil are merely banished from the upper planes and left to fend for themselves. The Empyreal Citadels. Although the Celestials are careful not to attract undue attention to themselves while on the prime material plane, they closely watch any worlds where evil has gained a foothold. If it appears that such a world is in imminent danger of falling to the fiendish legions of the lower planes, the Celestials prepare to stand against the threat. They plan their battles and launch their forces from the safety of an Empyreal Citadel, which they construct on the contested world. To build their stronghold, the Celestials first locate, or create, if possible, a portal that connects the threatened world with the upper planes. Then, in utter secrecy and under a veil of invisibility, they build a fortress around that gate using materials brought from the upper planes. Over a period of years, through marvels of architectural engineering and magic, they expand the structure both upward and outward until it is complete. An Empyreal Citadel is a gigantic conglomeration of interconnecting towers, majestic cathedral, and buttressed armories. It is as large as any city, and its peaks rise upwards for miles. Nothing on the prime material plane can compare with it in terms of sheer architectural beauty, and its magnificence serves to remind the fiends that the Celestials are ready to defend that world with their lives. An Empyreal Citadel can serve as the launch point for a huge army. Not only can the structure itself hold thousands of Celestials and their allies, but several thousand more can be waiting in readiness on the other side of the gateway. In the case of overcrowded worlds on which secret construction is more problematic, the Celestials might build an Empyreal Citadel on a moon, in a desert, or underwater. In any case, the Celestials construct their citadels in places where the natives would least expect to find them, the better to keep them secret from prying mortals. Empyreal Citadels exist on many worlds, but most of them have never been seen by mortal eyes. Rumor has it that one exists in the Sea of Dust on Oerth, and that the Celestials have deliberately spread warnings about the area's hostile nature to discourage exploration there. It was suspected that the Asimon may have secretly been building one of the structures under the Great Glacier of northern Faerun as well, in response to a long history of strange events that have occurred amid the nearby ruins of Hellgate Keep. Serving the gods. A Celestial serves the general cause of good, not necessarily a specific god. In a sense, Celestials are children of the upper planes, and the good powers are akin to their parents, or perhaps their godparents, pardon the pun. Celestials serve and honor the upper planar deities by performing and inspiring good deeds, thinking and spreading righteous thoughts, and combating evil. They do these things because it is in their nature to do so, not because they seek to win any one particular god's favor. There are exceptions, of course. Sometimes a Celestial decides to serve a particular deity to the exclusion of others, perhaps hoping to become that god's proxy one day. Although Celestials do not pledge allegiance to any particular powers, they do receive their innate abilities from specific gods, who function as their primary deities, according to Advanced D&D 2nd Edition, Warriors of Heaven. So, a Celestial must select a primary power regardless of the Celestial's devotion, as the grantor of their innate abilities. They may, if desired, also select a secondary power as well, another god to whom the Celestial maintains some devotion. In both cases, the primary power is the one the Celestial actually serves. Celestials do not need to have the exact same alignments as their primary powers, but they must share at least one aspect of alignment with those deities. So, for example, a neutral good Cardinal could serve a lawful good deity because one aspect, good, lines up with that deity. They don't need to share any aspects with their secondary powers, but Celestials can never serve or honor gods with evil alignments. Those who strive to be proxies almost always match the alignments of their primary powers precisely, but there have been notable exceptions. A few Celestials have shown their deities new ways of thinking and thus earned places as their proxies despite differences in alignment. Celestials use their gods as moral compasses. The deities represent a purity of thought and deeds worthy of devotion. The amount of contact Celestials have with their primary and secondary powers varies, as does the nature of those relationships. The mightier Celestials, Solars, Tomarchons, Tulani, Leonals, and extremely high-level Asuras and Asimars, speak to their gods directly, but few others are worthy of standing in the presence of divinity. On rare occasions, however, a celestial of lower station gains a deity's special favor or accomplishes an impressive task that draws a god's attention. As celestials gain experience and advance within the celestial hierarchy, they become more involved with their gods. Lower-ranking individuals follow the instructions of their superiors and almost never speak to the powers directly. High-ranking celestials might have open relationships with the proxies of their deities. In extremely rare cases, primary or secondary powers might regard certain high-level celestials as worthy of direct communication. But this can only occur after those individuals have proven their worth many times over. Those who manage to serve their primary powers with excellence might someday become proxies themselves, carrying divine words and will to the far reaches of the multiverse. Note that some celestials are restricted to particular upper planes. For example, Lantern Archons can't leave Mount Celestia, so the primary and secondary powers of such a creature would be chosen from those residing on that plane. Becoming a proxy. A proxy is an extremely powerful individual, in this case a celestial, who has received the greatest honor a deity can bestow, the right to speak the divine word. Such beings are the power's most valuable agents and servants, exerting divine influence in places where gods cannot or do not wish to go, including Sigil, the prime material plane, the realms of other gods, and other planes of existence. A celestial who accepts the role of proxy receives an infusion of the god's strength, which brings with it remarkable new abilities. However, not all celestials desire proxyhood, as it involves total subservience to a god, total sublimation of personal desires, a total devotion to a divine agenda. A celestial must be willing to cast aside all their personal desires and remain utterly loyal to the ideals of one god. Obedience is absolute, and proxies can never twist, refuse, or ignore commands from their gods. They must be willing to comply with any order, including sacrifice of their own life, to advance their deity's agendas. Not all proxies are created equal. 3 different types of proxies are known to exist, mostly coming from Advanced D&D 2nd Edition. Temporary proxies serve as vessels of divine power for only a short time, usually long enough to complete one mission. Such celestials who perform their task well may climb higher and higher in the service of their power, gaining ever more responsibility. Those who show a special knack for their work and prove themselves over and over often become lesser or even greater proxies. Lesser proxies serve their gods in a variety of ways, but they don't take on major challenges. They are usually celestials with the spirit to succeed, but not the aptitude. However, they're still more important than most of the gods' servants. Greater proxies are the ones gods trust to complete the most important tasks, the missions that absolutely cannot fail. They also mind the realms while their gods are away. Nearly any celestial can serve as a proxy, regardless of race or rank. The deities of Mount Celestia like to use archons. Those of Arcadia and the Olympians favor solars and which are spirit warriors that guard the upper planes. Arborean gods prefer eladrins and planetars. Ysgardian powers are particularly inclined towards asuras and devas. The gods of Elysium and Bitopia favor Gardenals and Asimon of various ranks. And Asimon of all different ranks fill the role of proxy all across the upper planes. To become proxies, celestials must first prove themselves worthy of consideration by devoting themselves to advancing the cause of their chosen gods and embracing the right ideals. Even so, there's no guarantee that a deity will choose a particular candidate, no matter how perfect they may seem. The gods work in mysterious ways. Some deities test would-be proxies when they least expect it. A celestial who passes such a test may become a temporary proxy and receive a special assignment by which to prove their real worth. Some such tasks may seem utterly mundane. but the god is often more interested in how the proxy completes the assignment than the task itself. A celestial who thinks the life of a proxy consists of one noble deed after another is a poor candidate for the role. Proxies are easy to identify, usually because each bears a god mark. Sometimes this is a physical mark on the face, forehead, or palm, and sometimes it is simply a visible divine aura. Usually, celestial proxies are allowed to keep their original forms, but sometimes their gods see fit to transform them into other beings entirely. A divine proxy speaks and acts on behalf of the divine being they serve. When the demand for a deity's presence is too high, a deity might use proxies. Proxies are divine minions invested with a small portion of the deity's power. As of 3rd edition's deities and demigods, a deity may invest one rank of its power, reducing its divine rank accordingly, in a single servant for as long as the deity chooses. The candidate must be physically present for the deity to perform the investiture. While so invested, a proxy gains any salient divine abilities, which were essentially feats for deities, held by the patron deity as well as the powers and abilities of a rank 1 demigod. But without the requisite ability scores or divine ranks, the proxy might not be able to use all the powers and abilities they are bestowed. A deity could have more than one proxy, but it loses one divine rank for each proxy it invests. This is a major investment into any type of creature, as even greater gods can only have up to 20 divine ranks as of 3rd edition and 3.5e. A deity can retrieve a single divine rank as a standard action, and doing so does not require the physical presence of the proxy. A proxy might even become stranded on a distant plane if the deity decides to retrieve its rank while the proxy is located there. For the deity's purposes, a proxy is the deity. An insult to a proxy is an insult to the patron deity. Likewise, an attack on the proxy is an attack on the god they serve. Deities expect their proxies to be treated with the same awe, respect, and reverence as the deities themselves. Deities rarely entrust divine ranks to creatures of low intelligence. Proxies are most often exemplary servants, the best of those who serve their patron. Divine gifts. Once it secures proxy status, a celestial receives one or more divine gifts, special powers bestowed by their gods. Earlier I spoke about the salient divine abilities from 3.5e and 3rd edition, in which the proxy gained the same abilities their deity had, just were only able to use a certain number. The divine gifts section came from Warriors of Heaven from Advanced D&D 2nd edition, so it's similar, but there were more specific abilities. Some proxies can slay with a glance, heal by touch, call down holy fire, or perform any number of wondrous tasks with a mere thought. The nature and limits of these gifts vary depending on the deity. A god of healing won't give a proxy the ability to cripple or wither foes, while a power of revenge won't bestow the ability to speak soothing words. The gods hand out abilities reflective of their portfolios. Warriors of Heaven gives some examples of abilities gods may grant their proxies, but it's not an exhaustive list, so other powers could potentially be added other than those described. Some of my favorite examples include a deity of cold granting their proxy the ability to shoot icicle daggers from their eyes. I am not making that up, that is from the book. A deity with the sphere of pacifism granting the ability to destroy weapons. A god of wealth giving their proxy the ability to make money appear and disappear. A proxy of a god of death may be able to destroy any resurrected individual. And a deity of magic giving their proxy the ability to remove a wizard's power, among many other examples. Proxies hold particular powers only so long as their deities wish. A god can change or remove divine gifts at will. Fallen proxies. Some proxies can't handle the pressure of representing the powers, while others eventually tire of the strain. A proxy might quit in the middle of a crucial mission or suffer an identity crisis. Most good deities react with forgiveness and mercy in such cases, and many even try to find their broken servants comfortable and better suited places in the celestial hierarchy. Of course, not all powers let a proxy who fails them go casually ahead towards other things. Some gods don't tolerate mistakes, and a proxy who proves to be a spectacular disappointment could face severe repercussions. Proxies who deliberately turn against their powers or abandon their duties must face their god's own wrath, or, failing that, the Celestial Tribunal. Punishments in such cases may include the loss of all divine gifts and exile from the upper planes, or it could be much worse, depending on the seriousness of the offense and the temperament of the deity. The death of gods. Gods are immortal, yet they have been known to die. Is that paradoxical? Maybe, but that's the nature of the multiverse. However, the death of a deity is not exactly an everyday occurrence. A deity can die in a few ways, but most often one of two ways: by losing their worshippers and fading into obscurity, or at the hands of other deities. Gods who do pass on end up on the astral plane, where their husks drift helplessly like tremendous islands of rock. The death of an upper planar god has many repercussions that affect not only the multiverse, but the other inhabitants of the upper planes as well. A celestial who loses their secondary power may choose a new one to fill the void or not, as desired. But a celestial whose primary power dies loses all innate spell-like abilities and magic until they find another primary power to serve. This isn't always easy. A celestial must prove their worth to the new deity, usually by approaching one of the god's proxies and asking permission to perform a task or service on behalf of the power. Upon accepting the celestial, the new god restores all of the celestial's lost abilities and magical powers. The death of a god is a far more serious matter for any proxies they may have had, since proxies hold within themselves a portion of their god's divine essence. The best a proxy can hope for is to lose all of their divine gifts, including their innate celestial powers. And it's likely all the proxy's ability scores will drop by half as well. It's not unknown, however, for a proxy who is especially close to their god to perish along with the deity, often in a spectacular burst of fiery energy. This was all according to Advanced D&D 2nd Edition's Warriors of Heaven, and I found no other source that has contradicted that Celestials lose significant power when not connected to a deity. But I'll come back to this later. Celestials on the Prime. Though Celestials spend most of their time on the upper planes, they have vested interests in the events on the Prime Material Plane. So much so that they are constantly striving to protect it from the incursions of fiends and other minions of evil. The Prime contains countless worlds, many of them populated by devout worshippers of good deities. These deities frequently call upon their celestial servants to guide their prime material worshippers and protect the faithful from harm. Were it not for the tireless efforts of these beings, agents of the lower planes might have corrupted or enslaved most mortal worlds aeons ago. The prime material plane has been a battlefield between the forces of good and evil for a long time. Cataclysms resulting from wars fought between the minions of evil and the servants of light have destroyed entire worlds. But even in those areas that have remained mostly untouched, Celestials work tirelessly to reveal evil's presence and, through exalted intervention, avoid future calamity. Worlds such as Toril, Kryn, and Oerth have caught the attention of the lower planes, but thanks in part to the swift response from the upper planes, they have not yet fallen to evil. Of course, the powers of the upper planes work in mysterious ways, rarely allowing prime material mortals to witness their actions or fully understand their motives. The desire of the deities of the upper plane to keep prime material worshippers safe and happy is more than just charitable goodness. The worship and service of mortals is what gives the gods their power, though few realize this. The fewer and less devoted a god's worshippers, the weaker the god. Therefore, deities give their servants energy and strength in the hopes of even greater reciprocation. To ensure the strength of their power bases, the gods sometimes test the faith of their worshippers on the prime material plane. If something seriously jeopardizes that faith, the deities may choose to intervene by sending their avatars, their proxies, or their emissaries to put matters right. Avatars are physical manifestations of the gods themselves and appear only in circumstances dire enough to warrant direct intervention. On Oearth, a pact between the gods prohibits most avatars. Proxies we've already spoken about in detail. Emissaries are free celestials who serve their gods by choice, but they are not vessels for divine power or consciousness. Certain rules bind celestial proxies and emissaries while they are on the prime material plane. These limitations forbid most forms of direct intervention and mandate low-profile activities. These rules are in place to keep well-meaning celestials from meddling too much in moral affairs, protect them from possible capture, and prevent natives of the prime material plane from learning more than they should about the true nature of the upper planes. The rules of prime material conduct. Celestials may not intervene directly in the affairs of prime material beings in ways that draw attention to themselves or to the greater forces of the upper planes. There are 3 reasons for this. Firstly, evil gods are as vigilant as their upper planar counterparts. When celestials boldly effect changes on a prime material world, the wicked deities take notice and retaliate against what they consider a blatant attempt to drive out evil. To conceal the hand of good, celestials must act discreetly. Secondly, prime material beings can't always rely on celestials to win their battles. There aren't enough of the latter in the multiverse to defend every world against its many and various threats. Mortals need their own heroes, and champions tend not to arise in realms that rely heavily on agents of the gods to solve problems. So celestials must try to inspire others towards acts of courage rather than doing everything themselves. Third, and lastly, natives of prime material worlds should never fully comprehend the nature of celestials or the upper planes, as familiarity tends to lessen the sense of awe and majesty that these realms and their residents inspire. Prime material beings who learn too much are likely to spread their newfound knowledge among unworthy creatures who might use that information for evil. Additionally, mortals who experience no awe at the sight of a celestial might sometimes feel similarly unimpressed or irreverent towards their gods, and such an offense the gods cannot abide. The previous rules do not in any way prohibit celestials from making contact or participating in events on the prime material plane. In truth, they may freely interact with prime material mortals provided that they refrain from using their powers except in dire need, and then only discreetly. Refrain from revealing their true natures or true selves, though there are situations in which such a revelation would be useful if not prudent. And refrain from providing assistance or information, especially knowledge of the upper planes and their gods, beyond what is absolutely necessary. Any celestial who violates these restrictions feels a strong compulsion to return to the upper planes and report their infractions. Those who ignore this urge are eventually recalled by their superiors. Punishment for celestials who take too obvious a hand in prime material affairs usually consists of confinement to their home planes until they can earn back the confidence of their superiors or persuade them that circumstances warranted their actions. Such violations rarely require the involvement of the Celestial Tribunal, but an offender might still have to appear before a superior, a proxy of their deity, or, if the celestial is very high in rank, the actual deity themselves. Eladrins have a special restriction. While on the prime material plane, they must not, under any circumstances, reveal their true forms to the natives, regardless of how good a reason they have. Those who do are confined to Arborea for 1,001 years. Only Queen Morwell, the ruler of the Eladrins, can lessen this punishment, but she does so only in the most special circumstances. Cardinals, on the other hand, are less restricted. Members of this race are free to reveal their true selves anywhere in the multiverse, including on the prime material plane. As one might expect, they exercise this privilege frequently. Celestials encourage Aasimar to refrain from revealing their true natures as well, but do not openly punish those who do so. Still, Aasimar who continually strut about prime material worlds, lording their abilities over the common folk, might earn the scorn of pure Celestials who view them as dangerous, irresponsible, or both. Inspiring goodness in others. The Celestials' power and numbers are not enough to protect the entire prime material plane from the onslaught of evil. As long as evil exists, the worlds of the prime material plane are vulnerable. The fiends and evil gods offer their pawns power in exchange for obedience, and that enticing offer seduces many mortals. Agents of the upper planes endeavor to tilt the balance in good's favor by visiting worlds in peril, inspiring the natives to follow the path of righteousness, and subtly empowering them to take any realms that evil has already seized. This is the primary goal of any Celestial on the prime material plane, to inspire goodness in select individuals who, in turn, can inspire others. Celestials choose their targets very carefully, often traveling, as I mentioned earlier, with their true forms concealed to seek out those who seem destined for greatness. As a consequence, the heroes, leaders, and other shapers of history often count one or more disguised Celestials among their friends and confidants. Upper planar agents also maintain close contact with certain other individuals who display a so-called inner fire, such as martyrs, artists, and others whose convictions and drive to succeed might lead them to accomplish great things. Sometimes a valorous cleric can be assigned a specific veteran Celestial to watch over them, and it is this Celestial that answers their lesser planar ally and commune spells. Some Celestial visitations are little more than brief appearances, while others span months or even years. In many cases, Celestials adopt disguises and pretend to be stalwart companions, able henchmen, trusted mentors, or all-knowing seers. As we learned earlier, Celestials on the prime material plane must try to inspire others towards good deeds without revealing their true identities in most cases. This restriction often makes the job more difficult, but ultimately more rewarding. After all, mortals who know they're talking to the agent of a god tend to say anything they can to gain favor, whether or not the words reflect what is in their heart. So whenever possible, Celestials remain out of the spotlight, instead allowing it to shine upon the target of their visitation, whose deeds can in turn inspire others for ages to come. Some Celestials take it upon themselves to befriend evildoers, hoping to lead them down the path of righteousness. Such missions are fraught with peril, but a Celestial can know no greater triumph than reaching into the conscience of a poor soul lured to the side of evil and inspiring them to see the error of their wicked ways. When the time comes to move on, Celestials frequently leave behind gifts or impart words of wisdom to the mortals with whom they have interacted. Most choose to fade away in an unobtrusive manner, though some, given to the dramatic, have faked their own demise to inspire former colleagues toward even nobler goals. Diminishing Power. Celestials draw their strength from the upper planes. The energies of those good realms sustain them and infuse them with power far beyond that available to prime material mortals. So it shouldn't be surprising that a Celestial who spends too much time away from the material planes begins to weaken. The longer the separation, the greater the loss. The following penalties are from Advanced D&D 2nd Edition Warriors of Heaven. For each month spent away from the upper planes, the Celestial loses 1 hit point. For each year spent away from the upper planes, a Celestial loses 5% magic resistance. For every decade spent away from the upper planes, the Celestial loses resistance or immunity to one particular attack form: cold, fire, electricity, poison, and so on. Plus 1 point from natural armor class, which can worsen to a minimum armor class of 10. A Celestial absent for this long also suffers a -1 penalty to all saving throws. To regain any lost abilities, a Celestial must return to the upper planes for a duration equal to that of their absence. Therefore, a Celestial who lives on the prime material plane for 5 years must spend 5 years on the upper planes to recuperate fully. Nothing else, short of a carefully worded wish or the direct intervention of a god, can restore such losses. Not restoration spells, not heal spells, and not magic items. This seems somewhat contradictory to what we learned earlier about Celestials losing their innate powers if their primary deity perishes. Both passages come from Warriors of Heaven, so it stands to reason that Celestials draw their power from both. But if that's the case, why would Celestials lose all of their power if their prime deity is gone? Would they not retain some from being on one of the upper planes? It seems a bit strange to me, especially because fiends don't have this restriction, either from losing power while away or needing to be pledged to a deity for power. Though in recent editions, while it's not explicitly stated, it seems that this no longer affects the Celestials, the whole losing power while away from the upper planes thing, as there are many examples of Celestials that were either trapped, banished, or imprisoned that still have the normal abilities typical to one of their race despite their absence from the upper planes, or at least suffer fewer penalties than 2nd edition. Celestial Paragons. If I asked you what the most powerful Celestial is, you may say the Leonul, Tulani, or more obviously for the 5th edition players, the Solars. But if we compare these creatures to their lower planar counterparts, they'd match up with the likes of Pit Fiends or Balors in terms of power and their ranking within their hierarchies. However, some of the Celestial races have their own equivalent to the Archfiends of the lower planes, and those are the Celestial Paragons. The Archons, Cardinals, and Eladrins have their rulers, leaders, and exemplars on the Celestial planes where good holds sway. These Celestial Paragons share much in common with each other, and, in some ways, are also similar to their Archfiend counterparts on the lower planes. At the same time, each is a unique being, blessed with powers and abilities that relate directly to that Paragon's area of interest and expertise. Raziel and Pistis Sophia are both Archon Lords, but their nature and abilities are completely different, as Raziel is the champion of paladins and Pistis Sophia is the exemplar of monks. While Celestials such as Solars and Planetars number among the most powerful celestial servants of good deities, the Celestial Paragons function independently of the deities, standing as powers in their own right. They have their own followers and agents. They pursue their own agendas, which may or may not coincide with the goals of deities of the same alignment. Aside from the deities, they are the most powerful creatures of good in existence. They also supremely embody what it means to be good. Celestial Paragons act as patrons for orders and organizations such as the Fists of Raziel and the Champions of Gwynharwith. These organizations might, in turn, act as patrons for adventurers or, at some point, recruit them as members, which may include benefits such as access to certain prestige classes from the Book of Exalted Deeds for the player characters. Unlike the rulers of the lower planes, the mighty celestials that govern the upper planes do not desire worship. They claim that their purpose is to encourage goodness and point mortals towards the deities of good. They do not tolerate cults organized in their name and have no ability to grant spells directly to mortals, though this was 3rd edition, so it's possible that these paragons could be patrons for warlocks in more recent editions. That said, all of the Celestial Paragons are patrons of organizations or even specific individuals they have chosen to carry their ideals forward in the mortal realms. Raziel, for example, is the patron archon of paladins, and the Fists of Raziel is an organization formed in the archon's name that brings together paladins of all faiths, whether they worship Hyronius, Pelor, Moradin, Yondala, Bahamut, or some other good deity, or even no deity at all. In this role as patron of organizations and individuals, the Celestials sometimes petition good-aligned deities to grant particular spells and domains to their followers. For this reason, Celestials are associated with certain domains commonly chosen by clerics of the Celestial Orders. In this way, a cleric or paladin could effectively serve a Celestial Paragon, but just receive their spells from another source. So the class options for serving a Celestial Paragon are not as limiting as they may at first appear. While they cherish the orders that serve them, the Celestial Paragons are careful to remind their followers, and sometimes themselves, that they are not deities. To do otherwise would be to succumb to the sin of pride. To keep a balanced universe as a dungeon master, if you have decided that the Archdevils and Demon Lords are actually deities with Divine Rank 1, as I talked about briefly in my Demon Lord video, it is probably best to grant the same status to the Celestial Paragons. Even with a divine rank, the Celestial Paragons remain the humblest of demigods, still pointing mortals towards the worship of the real deities of the campaign rather than accepting cults in their own honor. Channeling a Celestial Paragon. In a high-level or epic-level campaign, a group of 4 to 6 adventurers can effectively become a Celestial Paragon. Channel Celestial Paragon is an epic-level spell available to epic-level spellcasters as detailed in the epic-level handbook. Epic-level characters might research and use this spell if they need to confront an archfiend. As an alternative, characters who have not quite attained epic levels, around 18th level or so, could be allowed to gain the same effect by completing a series of arduous quests, if the Dungeon Master allows it. In either case, the targets of a Channel Celestial Paragon spell each gain some aspect of the Paragon's power. Essentially, each player gets to run a part of the Paragon, allowing all the characters to remain active participants in a fight that would otherwise be out of their league. Other celestial races also have their leaders. For example, the Grand Celestial Host of the Asuras is led by a 25th level Asura named Absalom. But these other such leaders are not considered Celestial Paragons. Combat. As creatures of forthright goodness, Celestials don't attack without compelling reason. It often takes such things as a direct assault or a threat against a defenseless victim to rouse them to violence. They try to spare innocents and bystanders whenever possible, and use non-lethal attacks if doing so allows them to win the fight. Their mobility and array of magical abilities makes them elusive foes. They take the time to plan their attacks carefully, only wading immediately into melee if the situation is dire. Most Celestials are armed with a variety of non-lethal attacks and special abilities, which they reserve primarily for those rare occasions where they must fight or subdue good beings. Against creatures of evil or beings who have somehow provoked their wrath, Celestials are willing to unleash the full measure of their lethal, otherworldly powers. Most Celestials have excellent skills in melee as well, and they do not hesitate to take on their foes hand to hand. For creatures that dislike killing, they are exceptionally good at it. Celestial qualities. Celestials, as we've discussed, have a wide variety of abilities, especially among the many types of Celestials. Some common abilities do come up between the Celestials in certain editions. For example, in 3rd edition and 3.5e, Celestials had tongues, allowing all Celestials to speak with any creature that has a language, as though using a tongues spell cast by a 14th level caster. This ability was always active. Immunities. All Celestials were immune to electricity and petrification attacks. Resistances. Cardinals and Eladrins had a cold resistance and acid resistance of 20. Essentially, they could ignore 20 points of cold damage and 20 points of acid damage each round. And all Celestials received a +4 racial bonus on fortitude saves against poison. Keen vision. All Celestials had low light vision and 60-foot dark vision. As outsiders, which are non-elemental creatures originating from a plane other than the prime material, Celestials could not be raised or resurrected. Celestials were able to speak Celestial, Infernal, and Draconic, though their tongues ability made this really only applicable for things such as written text. Celestials were considered outsiders, a 3rd edition term meaning that the creature is at least partially composed of the essence, but not necessarily the material, of some plane other than the material plane. Some creatures start out as some other type and become outsiders when they attain a higher or lower state of spiritual existence. For example, petitioners that have chosen to become Celestials. Unlike most other living creatures, an outsider does not have a dual nature, which means that its soul and body form one unit. When an outsider is slain, no soul is set loose. Spells that restore souls to their bodies, such as Raise Dead, Reincarnate, and Resurrection, don't work on an outsider. It takes a different magical effect, such as a Limited Wish, Miracle, or True Resurrection to restore it to life. The only exceptions to this among the Celestials, at least the only ones that are important right now, are the Aasimar. As of 3rd edition, Aasimar were given the native subtype. These creatures were outsiders that have mortal ancestors or a strong connection to the material plane, and can be raised, reincarnated, or resurrected just as other living creatures can be. Creatures of this subtype are native to the material plane, hence the subtype's name. Unlike true outsiders, native outsiders need to eat and sleep. According to Mort's Planar Parade from 5th edition, a petitioner or another celestial or fiend that is destroyed can reconstitute on a plane that shares its alignment after 100 years. Or it might choose to become one with that plane and never return. A creature that reforms on the planes multiple times becomes increasingly dissimilar from its original form. Earlier editions also have information about what happens when a celestial dies, but most of it is different and specific to each celestial race, so I'll cover that information in the videos for those specific celestials. Celestial magic. The Celestials guard their magic closely. They only rarely share the secrets of their magnificent spells with other Celestials, and never with residents of other planes. However, that doesn't mean that these spells don't get around. Many prime material spell seekers have dedicated their whole lives to acquiring magic just beyond mortal reach. Celestials who can cast wizardly or priestly magic choose their spells from those available to their race. Some celestial spells are available to all celestial races. A majority of them are kept secret by whichever race developed the spell in the first place. Though rarely a celestial may have access to a spell developed by another celestial race, whether they were entrusted with it or uncovered it themselves. Spells developed by a specific celestial race are still able to be cast by other celestials. The limits of who can and cannot cast the spells are due to their secretive nature and the spellcasting capabilities of the individual, not the spellcaster's creature type. Exalted Feats. According to Champions of Valor, intelligent, good-aligned creatures of the highest moral standards are sometimes gifted supernatural abilities in the form of exalted feats. Such gifts can only be bestowed by powerful agents of good, deities, celestials, or similar creatures. In many cases, a ritual must be performed to gain these feats, usually in the form of the recipient swearing a sacred vow in the presence of a celestial being. One who willingly and willfully commits an evil act loses all benefits from all of their exalted feats. They can regain these benefits if they atone for the violations. Some celestials can confer other benefits onto individuals, such as celestial attended births. Some people are born to do great things, and the easiest way to recognize this is if a celestial arrives to announce or witness their birth. With dozens of good-aligned deities watching over the mortal affairs and thousands of births every day, a celestial visitation at childbirth can happen once per year, often enough to be remarkable to those involved, but common enough so those aware of the supernatural do not get obsessive about the attention they receive. Followers of the celestial's deity, and in rare cases the actual celestial that was in attendance, observe the children of these blessed births and try to give them proper spiritual guidance when the time is right. Sometimes these mentors go too far in their teachings and damage the child's potential, but in most cases the child grows up to be a special individual, special enough to be an adventurer, for example, with unusual talents. Another example of these celestial gifts are the Infused. In the never-ending battle of good versus evil, the odds often seem unfairly stacked in favor of the forces of darkness. The cruel and wicked denizens of the lower planes have always used mortals to enact their plans of violence, debauchery, and mayhem. In answer to the fiendish corruptions, the Celestials have empowered their most devout servants, creating a new breed of holy warriors that scholars call the Infused. The Infused are mortals the creatures of the upper planes deem worthy of being agents of good in a time of peril. Each infused soul is bonded with a celestial who then lives inside them. As the chosen mortal performs good deeds, the bonded celestial grants the infused more of its powers. All those who are given this highest of honors receive a holy mark, an icon of glory that is a graphic representation of the blessings of the celestial and the divine powers it serves. There exists a wide variety of infused, each with their own unique powers, which I will detail in each individual video covering the corresponding celestials or in a video on the infused. Dealing with celestials. Sometimes adventuring parties will end up dealing with celestials, and that can come with a few more difficulties than you'd initially think. An adventurer shouldn't step onto another plane believing that everything is exactly as it was on their own home plane. When one embarks on a planar adventure, they'll encounter things they never would have expected. The outer planes have different rules. Even something so basic as gravity can become subjective, so it shouldn't be surprising that the definition of good might be up to some interpretation. Differences of opinions on such a fundamental level can lead to conflict. This is especially true with celestials, the creatures of the outer planes that define goodness. There are plots and strategies waged non-stop in the outer planes, and the celestials are not above such conflict. They have their goals to strive for and their vision of what is best. As I mentioned earlier, some of them wish to stamp out evil at all costs. Some want to save evil creatures from themselves, and others just do as their deities command, trusting in the morality of a higher power. The desires of an adventuring party are minor in comparison to those greater demands, so it's natural for conflict to erupt, even with those who are supposed to be on the same side. Of course, not every Celestial will butt heads with adventurers. Most are so pristinely good that they shun any action that could even be considered questionable. But no matter how good they are as a whole, all Celestials have quirks, faults, and habits that set each one apart as an individual. If a party of adventurers sees a pit fiend, they expect violence and bloodshed each and every single time. With a Solar, the party expects an ally and powerful acquaintance, but in some cases, they could be wrong. Celestials that act as antagonists towards good-aligned parties are incredibly rare, and such an encounter can drastically and permanently change the way a creature views Celestials. Celestials rarely act without cause. When considering motivations, it's important to note the difference between Celestials and mortal antagonists. Typically, mortal villains perform evil for their own personal benefit, whereas Celestial antagonists work against adventurers for something greater than themselves as individuals. Each of them, no matter the alignment, strongly believes that any actions they take are necessary to prevent the spread and domination of evil. Dragon Magazine issue 287 gives us examples of some philosophies that might motivate a Celestial, or any good-aligned antagonist. The following are those examples. The greatest good for the greatest number. The best course of action does the least damage to the largest number of people. Good is what makes the most people safe from harm. Personal freedoms and desires are less important than those of the larger group. This philosophy is rare among chaotically aligned Celestials as they put too much emphasis on personal freedoms, but many other Celestials share this point of view. The end justifies the means. Acts of treachery, lying, and other morally suspect actions are acceptable if such small evils will bring about a greater good. After all, it matters more who wins the war than who died during the fighting. Celestials with this outlook tend to be frowned upon by other Celestials because it is a philosophy that can cause a lot of trouble. However, all Celestials exemplify goodness, so they also tend to trust one another to make the right decisions. The means justify the end. If you acted with good intentions the entire time, it's fine if the end result benefits you more than it does others. Because you do good, what aids you will be a boon for the rest of the world. This self-centered view is surprisingly common among the more powerful Celestials. Creatures like Solars and Planetars often lack humility and consider their actions and goals more important than those of others. Omnibenevolence. All creatures, even the most hideously evil, deserve the chance to make amends for past misdeeds and join the side of the light. Of course, you must fight evil, but if there is a chance an evil creature could be redeemed, you must show mercy. A Celestial with this outlook is always willing to give foes the benefit of the doubt if they promise to reform, no matter how many times the Celestial has been betrayed. Pacifism. No one should commit any act that harms another, and the only viable response to such acts is love and forgiveness. Love will show wrongdoers the error of their ways and put them on the path of light. This point of view is rare among Celestials. They have lived too long in the face of great evil to turn the other cheek. But the rare Celestial that takes up this ideal can often gather hordes of followers. Scourge of Evil. Good beings exist to combat evil in all its forms. Keeping your sword sheathed in the face of evil is tantamount to committing evil yourself. Many Celestials share this philosophy. They believe that it is their duty to stamp out evil in all its forms. Sometimes they can be a little overzealous, but other Celestials consider that to be evidence of their desire to do good. When confronted by a Celestial, most characters will try to talk their way out of combat. In such situations, it's important to remember the intelligence and general viewpoint of the Celestial. The point of view of the Celestial helps to determine how willing it is to talk. Being good creatures, Celestials generally prefer peaceful solutions to problems, but many individual Celestials don't fit that generality. Intelligence also provides guidelines for how a Celestial will react to diplomacy. Clearly, if an attempt at diplomacy seems like a ruse, the Celestial won't comply, but even an honest attempt to parley might be ignored if the Celestial is sufficiently suspicious of those attempting to parley. If those who encounter the Celestial do get the Celestial to talk, they may find it more difficult than fighting. Less intelligent Celestials will stubbornly believe in their own decisions, while the more intelligent ones will use superior reasoning to argue their point of view. When there is no other option and a fight seems imminent, it's good to know what sorts of non-lethal weapons and spells can be used to take down Celestials. Presented in Dragon Magazine issue 287 is a list of items, spells, and combat tricks and tactics one can use to avoid slaying misguided good opponents who seem determined to destroy them. Weapons. The first weapon option is the net, or many nets to be safe. If a party is prepared to throw one net after another on a rampaging Celestial, eventually it will fail a check and suffer all the penalties associated with being entangled, based on whichever edition you happen to be playing. Once it's trapped, a party can use non-lethal strikes to subdue the Celestial, though in most cases you'd still need magic weapons to overcome its damage reduction or immunity. Note, some Celestials are skilled enough to make nets nearly worthless. In 3.5e, these were the Gales, Trumpet Archons, Astral Devas, Planetars, and Solars. But others, notably the Lantern Archons, Hound Archons, Avorals, Fears, and Leonals, in 3.5e were more susceptible to this attack. Another 3.5e example were magical saps. Saps were essentially cudgels that dealt exclusively non-lethal damage. Using a magical sap allowed players to deal subdual damage to creatures with high armor classes and damage reduction without suffering the penalty to attack rolls when trying to deal subdual damage with a weapon that deals regular damage. And of course, these needed to be magical to overcome damage reductions and immunities. Another such weapon was the whip. Though in 3.5e, while the whips dealt non-lethal damage and had a 15-foot range, they were also unable to damage creatures with higher bonuses to natural armor class. But they did give a bonus to disarming an opponent, so there were some benefits and drawbacks. And finally, weapons with the special quality Merciful from the Sword and Fist guidebook turned any weapon into one capable of dealing subdual damage. Spells. Half of the Celestials in the 3.5e Monster Manual had the ability to activate a minor globe of invulnerability as a free action. This meant that spellcasters facing these creatures in combat had to assume their low-level spells weren't going to work. In such a case, retreat might be the best option. Against other Celestials, most magic will work, subject to spell resistance checks. Note: when it comes to spells that involve interplanar travel, forced or voluntary, some Celestials can easily make their way back from wherever they were sent with spells of their own. Gales, Trumpet Archons, Planetars, Solars, and Fears could all cast divine spells at a high enough level to prepare a planeshift spell or two. So if you were to banish them, they could come back, given time to compensate for the semi-random nature of plane shift. At the very least, you might buy yourself some time. For those Celestials lacking higher level divine spells, this is a better option. They won't be back to bother their opponents again unless someone established a gate for them to use, or a deity or more powerful Celestial sends them back to the plane. Preventing Celestials from casting spells is also an important aspect of combat. Many Celestials can cast divine spells. Preventing this in earlier editions was as simple as holding an action until they began casting, and striking them in hopes of disrupting their concentration. More recently, spells like Counterspell exist for this specific purpose. And of course, when Celestials are immune to lower level spells or have a high spell resistance, it might be better to use your spell slots to buff the party than try to affect the Celestial. Monks were also of great use when fighting Celestials. Monks use unarmed strikes. In 3.5e, this meant they could do subdual damage without suffering the penalty to attack rolls because they were not using a melee weapon. They also have the stunning attack ability, which is a great way to take a Celestial down without taking it out. Of course, in 5th edition, all this talk of subdual damage doesn't matter. In 5th edition, as long as the finishing blow on an opponent is done with a melee attack, the attacker can choose to knock the creature out the moment the damage is dealt. Finally, one can appeal to a higher power. Even Celestials have to answer to someone. If you can get an even more powerful being on your side, you might be able to end the conflict before it goes too far. So don't be afraid to use spells like Planar Ally or other more powerful variants to call in a Solar to help you stop those pesky Avorals. And with that said, that is all I have on Celestials. Of course, there is much more in regards to the specifics of each Celestial race, but that can be left for other videos. If you found this video informative or enjoyable in any way, you could show your support by giving this video a like and hitting the subscribe button to stay informed of any of my future uploads. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!